In Coldwater Supermax, a black inmate was about to become part of a confrontation no one expected. One where the tables turned, and a former tormentor became the tormented. What started as a cruel joke by Sergeant Ray Kincaid, mocking inmates, during compliance games in the showers, spiraled when Kincaid woke up wearing an orange jumpsuit, locked inside the very cell block he once ruled with brutality. Malik Ramsey wasn't your typical inmate. For 3 years, he had endured enhanced discipline sessions designed to break spirits, ritualized degradation hidden behind steam and silence. Known for his unshakable dignity, commanding intellect, and quiet leadership among the inmates, Malik had become a symbol of unbroken resistance inside Coldwater's walls. When Kincaid was falsely processed as an inmate and dropped into population for his own protection, they had no idea they were messing with a man who remembered every humiliation and had spent years preparing for justice without revenge. Malik orchestrated a quiet reckoning, not through violence but through memory, ritual, and the slow unraveling of Kincaid's power, igniting a movement within the prison that exposed systemic abuse from the inside out. What began as a guard's abuse of power would become a federally investigated reckoning that shattered the illusion of control inside Coldwater. The prison, the Department of Corrections, and the nation watching would never forget the day Sergeant Ray Kincaid woke up behind bars, powerless, broken, and forced to crawl the same path of shame he once forced others to endure. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Ray Kincaid woke to darkness, not the familiar darkness of his bedroom with its reliable alarm clock glow, but a suffocating, disorienting void. His head throbbed. The mattress beneath him felt wrong, thin, plastic-covered, institutional. His mouth tasted of copper and chemicals. Must have been one hell of a night, he thought, reaching for the bedside lamp that wasn't there. His hand hit cold concrete instead. The realization arrived like a blow to the chest. This wasn't his home. A sliver of fluorescent light leaked under what could only be a cell door. Kincaid blinked hard, willing his eyes to adjust. The outlines of a toilet, sink, and metal desk slowly materialized. His stomach lurched as recognition dawned. This was Echo Block. He'd walked these corridors thousands of times, had personally escorted dozens of the state's most dangerous offenders to these very cells. But never from the inside. He jerked, upright, wincing at the protest of bruised ribs. Looking down, he saw his body clothed not in his crisp sergeant's uniform, but in a bright orange jumpsuit, the same one he'd watched countless men shuffle into, their dignity stripped away with their civilian clothes. "This isn't happening," he whispered, his voice catching. "This is some kind of joke." Yet the cold plastic ID band around his wrist told a different story. Kincaid, Raymond J., 45872. Status: intake processing. The familiar morning alarm blared through the tier, 6 a.m. count. Footsteps approached from the corridor, keys jingling. Kincaid composed himself, summoning 23 years of corrections officer authority. This was clearly a mistake, or a test, or a nightmare. The small viewing panel in his door slid open. A pair of eyes peered in, then quickly darted away. "Jenkins!" Kincaid called out, recognizing the guard. "What the hell is this? Get me out of here!" No response. The panel slid shut. "Jenkins!" Kincaid slammed his palm against the metal door. "Peterson! Anybody! This isn't funny!" The sound of his own voice bouncing back at him from concrete walls was the only answer. He turned back to examine the cell. 8 by 10 feet. Standard isolation dimensions. His gaze swept over the barren space until it caught on something out of place. A folded piece of paper on the metal desk. He snatched it up, hands trembling slightly despite himself. 5 words, block letters. "This is not a game." "Count clear," came the call from outside. Then the mechanical whir of cell doors throughout the block unlocking for morning meal. But his door remained sealed. Through the small window, Kincaid watched as inmates filed past, each one slowing to stare in disbelief, whisper, or grin. Word was spreading faster than wildfire. Some faces he recognized immediately, men he'd disciplined, men he'd broken, men who'd sworn to kill him given half a chance. His throat closed up as the gravity of his situation began to sink in. If this wasn't some elaborate prank, and the bruises on his body suggested it wasn't, then he was truly locked inside Coldwater Supermax as an inmate, which meant he was already a dead man. 2 guards finally came for him at 8:30, Alvarez and Washington, both rookies he'd trained. Their faces were carefully blank as they cuffed him. "Where's Blevins?" Kincaid asked, referencing his most loyal subordinate. Washington's eyes flicked up briefly, then back to the restraints. "Not on shift, Sergeant. I mean, Kincaid." "Look, one of you needs to get a message to the warden," Kincaid said, trying to keep his voice steady. "There's been a serious mistake here." "Warden's unavailable," Alvarez replied mechanically. "Administrative reasons." They led him from the cell, his ankles shackled, hands cuffed to a waist chain, exactly as he'd trained them to escort high-risk inmates. The irony wasn't lost on him. The corridor seemed longer from this side of the equation. Every step brought a new face pressed against a cell door window, everyone watching with hungry eyes. The silence was unnatural. Echo block was never quiet. But today, the tier held its collective breath, as if witnessing something almost sacred in its perversity. By the time they reached the secure elevator, Kincaid's collar was damp with sweat. "Washington," he said quietly. "What happened last night? Why am I here?" Washington looked straight ahead. "Can't discuss pending investigation, sir. Lieutenant Dunn will be handling all that." "Dunn? Rachel Dunn from Internal Affairs?" A cold prickle ran down Kincaid's spine. "Since when does IA put officers in population?" Neither guard answered. The elevator doors opened to B-level, general population. The noise hit him first. Hundreds of men talking, metal trays clattering, the controlled chaos of morning meal. As they stepped out, the din immediately began to die, rippling outward like a stone dropped in water. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. "Devil's here," someone whispered. Then louder. "The devil's wearing orange." A slow, rhythmic banging started, metal cups on tables. Others joined in until the sound became a tribal drumbeat echoing through the cavernous space. Kincaid kept his chin up, jaw tight. Never show fear. That's what I always taught the new guards. But his knees felt weak, his heart hammering against his ribs like it wanted to escape. "Eyes front," Washington muttered. "Don't engage." They bypassed the mess hall, leading him toward the administrative offices. Kincaid's gaze swept across the second-tier walkway above, and froze. Malik Ramsey stood at the railing, hands clasped behind his back. Unlike the other inmates, his face showed no emotion at all. No triumph, no rage, not even satisfaction. Just a steady, penetrating stare. The man they called Teach had never broken under Kincaid's special attention, never begged, never lost that infuriating dignity. Now, watching from above, he looked like a judge observing an execution. Kincaid quickly averted his eyes. The warden's office door was closed, but through the frosted glass, Kincaid could make out Elise Morell's silhouette, pacing as she spoke into a phone. Her voice filtered through, clipped and defensive. "Simply administrative reassignment. Pending review. The department has full confidence in Coldwater's." She paused, catching sight of Kincaid through the glass. Her back stiffened. "I'll have to call you back." She beckoned a young woman with a severe bun and FBI windbreaker, Lieutenant Dunn presumably. They conferred in hushed tones before Dunn stepped out, closing the door behind her. "Sergeant Kincaid," she said, her voice neutral but her eyes analytical. "I'm Lieutenant Rachel Dunn, Mississippi Department of Corrections Internal Affairs Division. I've been assigned to investigate allegations of excessive force and violations of inmate rights at this facility." "This is insane," Kincaid hissed, conscious of the guards flanking him. "You can't put me in population. Those men in there will kill me before the day's out." Dunn's face remained impassive. "You've been placed in protective custody status. though circumstances necessitated temporary housing and segregation. Protective custody? Kincaid barked a laugh that held no humor. In Echo Block? That's where I sent the worst offenders for years. Resources are limited, she replied coolly. We're working with what we have. I want a lawyer, now. You'll be afforded all rights due to you. She glanced at her watch. Right now you're scheduled for intake processing. Officer Alvarez will escort you. This is a death sentence and you know it. Kincaid's voice dropped. Is that what this is? Morrell throwing me to the wolves? Something flickered across Dunn's face, the briefest hint of doubt, before her professional mask returned. I suggest you cooperate fully, Mr. Kincaid. It's your best option at this point. As Alvarez led him away, Kincaid glanced back at the warden's door. Through the glass he could see Morrell standing before a small gathering of men in suits, district attorneys or federal prosecutors most likely. She was gesturing emphatically, distancing herself from whatever storm was breaking. 23 years of loyalty, Kincaid thought bitterly, and she's already decided I'm expendable. The processing room was familiar. He'd supervised thousands of intakes here. Now he stood on the opposite side of the counter, being photographed, fingerprinted, stripped of his possessions, the few he'd woken up with, a plastic comb, standard-issue underwear, slip-on shoes. Processing Officer Matthews will complete your intake interview, Alvarez said, gesturing to a small office. Kincaid's stomach dropped. Andre Matthews? You're putting me with Preach? Alvarez's face remained professionally blank. Counselor, Matthews handles all special case intakes. The door to the interview room opened, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered man with salt and pepper beard and wire-rimmed glasses. Andre, Preach. Matthews had been at Coldwater almost as long as Kincaid, but on the other side of the bars. Their history was complicated and bitter. Well, Matthews said, his deep voice carrying the same calm it always had, even when Kincaid had him in solitary for weeks on end. The Lord indeed works in mysterious ways. He gestured to the empty chair. Come on in, Sergeant. We have a lot to discuss. As Kincaid stepped forward, legs leaden with dread, a handwritten notice on the bulletin board caught his eye. A memo about upcoming staff changes and mandatory training sessions. At the bottom, today's date, April 16, 2011. Yesterday, Ray Kincaid had been king of Coldwater, untouchable and feared. Today, he was inmate 45872, about to be counseled by a man he'd once tormented, and surrounded by hundreds of men with every reason to want him dead. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded to Kincaid's ears like the final sealing of a tomb. The interview room felt impossibly small. Kincaid sat rigid, hands flat on the metal table, while Andre Matthews methodically arranged his intake forms. The silence stretched between them, weighted with history. Fingerprints are still on file from your employment records, Matthews finally said, not looking up. But we'll need fresh ones. Protocol. You're enjoying this, Kincaid said tightly. Matthews raised his eyes, expression unreadable behind his glasses. I've counseled 3,000 men in these walls, Sergeant. Helped them process rage, despair, denial, all stages of grief for their lost freedom. He folded his hands. You're no different. I don't belong here. Nobody believes they do. Not at first. Matthews pulled out a psychological evaluation form. Let's start with the basics. Have you ever had thoughts of harming yourself or others? A bitter laugh escaped Kincaid's throat. My job was maintaining order through force when necessary. You know that. That wasn't the question. Matthews' voice remained steady. In your current situation, are you having thoughts of suicide or violence? Kincaid's jaw tightened. I'm thinking plenty of people want to do violence to me. And how does that make you feel? How do you think it makes me feel? I'm surrounded by men I've disciplined for years. Kincaid leaned forward. What happened, Matthews? What am I even charged with? Matthews studied him for an uncomfortably long moment. The official statement cites administrative segregation pending investigation into serious violations. Beyond that, I'm not privy to details. That's bullshit. Perhaps. Matthews made a note on his form. But the walls talk, Sergeant. They always have. You know what they're saying now? Kincaid said nothing. They're saying someone high up needed a sacrifice. They're saying the Justice Department has been looking too closely at Coldwater's unusually high rate of inmate self-harm. They're saying there's missing footage, altered logs. Matthews removed his glasses, polishing them with meticulous care. They're saying your special discipline methods finally caught up to you. I maintained order in a maximum security facility housing the worst offenders in the state, Kincaid said through clenched teeth. Everything I did was sanctioned. Was it? Matthews replaced his glasses. All of it? Even the showers? Kincaid's face drained of color. Let me be clear, Matthews continued, his voice dropping. I'm not your friend, but I'm also not your executioner. My job, my calling, is to help men survive this place with some piece of their humanity intact. He leaned forward. Even you. I don't need your salvation. Matthews smiled, but it held no warmth. It's not salvation I'm offering, Sergeant, it's survival. And in here, those might be the same thing. In the surveillance room, Lieutenant Rachel Dunn rubbed her tired eyes as she reviewed the digital logs for the third time. Something wasn't adding up. So you're telling me, she said to the nervous technician beside her, that on 57 separate occasions in the past 18 months, the cameras in cellblock showers experienced routine maintenance issues at exactly the same time each week? That's what the logs show, the young man mumbled, not meeting her gaze. And no one found this pattern suspicious? Ma'am, I just maintain the equipment. Scheduling is done by security operations, Sergeant Kincaid's department. Done. Pulled up the body cam archives. Show me the footage from any of the officers present during these maintenance periods. The technician's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. That's the thing, Lieutenant. The corresponding body cam files are, well, they're gone. Gone? Dunn's voice sharpened. 57 incidents and not a single backup? The system shows they were uploaded, then deleted during routine purges. Policy only requires we keep non-incident footage for 30 days. Who authorized these purges? The technician pointed to the signature at the bottom of each deletion. Log R. Kincaid, Sergeant Security Operations. Dunn sat back, her mind racing. I need to see Warden Morell's authorization forms for these maintenance periods. I don't have access to those. Find someone who does. She checked her watch. And get me the personnel file for a corrections officer named Blevins. As the technician hurried out, Dunn noticed a notification on her tablet, a new email from the Justice Department. The subject line made her stomach clench. Coldwater investigation, additional allegations, urgent. The cell they assigned to Kincaid was on D Block, the geriatric and low-risk unit, as far from general population as possible while still maintaining the fiction that he wasn't receiving special treatment. His cellmate was a wizened white man in his 70s, serving year 23 of a life sentence for killing an IRS agent. Morris Whitley looked up from his crossword puzzle as Kincaid was escorted in, his roomy eyes widening in recognition. Well, I'll be damned, the old man whispered. They finally got you. Close your mouth, Whitley, Kincaid growled, dropping onto the lower bunk, his bunk, ordinarily. The reversal wasn't lost on him. The cell door slid shut with a metallic clang, leaving them alone. Heard you was coming, Morris continued, seemingly unfazed. Whole prison's talking, some saying you got set up, others saying justice finally caught up. I'm not discussing my case with you. Suit yourself. Morris returned to his puzzle. But friendly advice? Might want to figure out who your friends are. Quick. Ain't many folks in here inclined to. See you wake up tomorrow. Kincaid stared at the ceiling, the reality of his situation settling over him like a shroud. 23 years enforcing rules, maintaining control, building a reputation for uncompromising, sometimes brutal discipline. How many men in these walls had he put in solitary? How many had he stripped of privileges, of dignity? How many would now see his presence as divine justice? After an hour of silence, Morris spoke again. "Word is Ghost been looking for you." "Dwayne Lattimore," he clarified when Kincaid didn't respond. "Malik's enforcer." That got Kincaid's attention. What's he saying? Saying nothing. That's what makes Ghost scary. He don't talk, he acts. Morris set his puzzle aside. But Malik's keeping him on a leash, far as I hear. For now. Kincaid turned to face the old man. Why would Ramsey hold him back? Morris shrugged. Malik plays chess while most play checkers. Always 3 moves ahead. He eyed Kincaid curiously. You really don't know why you're in here, do you? Political bullshit. Morrell needed someone to take the fall for her failing prison. Maybe. Morris didn't sound convinced. Or maybe somebody finally got proof of what happens in the showers. Kincaid was across the cell in a heartbeat, one arm pressed against the old man's throat. What did you say? Morris didn't struggle, just stared back with calm, ancient eyes. You really gonna kill your only potential ally your first day in? Think, boy. The tension held for several seconds before Kincaid released him, stepping back. Nobody knows about that, nobody who'd talk. Everybody knows, Morris wheezed, rubbing his throat. Everybody. The question is who finally got evidence the higher-ups couldn't ignore. In the corner of the yard, farthest from the guard towers, Malik Ramsey sat at a concrete table, seemingly absorbed in a game of chess with himself. But his attention was on the tight circle of men standing around him, his council as they were known throughout Coldwater. This is our chance, insisted Dwayne Ghost Lattimore, his voice barely above a whisper despite his imposing frame. The devil's in our house now, vulnerable. And then what? Malik moved upon. They locked down the whole prison. We lose library privileges, educational programs, family visitation, everything we've built. Man's got to pay, Teach. Ghost's eyes burned with a cold fury. For Richardson, for Martinez, for what he did to you. He will pay, Malik assured, him studying the board. But not on his terms, not on the administration's terms either. Another voice joined in. Andre Preach Matthews, fresh from his session with Kincaid. He's scared, putting up a front, but the man's terrified. As he should be, Ghost muttered. How much does he know? Malik asked. Preach shook his head. He knows something's happening, but not what, not why. Thinks it's political. Morrell scapegoating him. It's more than that, said a younger inmate named Calvin. My cousin works in the administration building. Says there's a federal investigation. Justice Department. Malik absorbed this, moving another chess piece. Then we need to be even more careful. Any violence toward Kincaid gives the administration an excuse to classify this as a dangerous inmate uprising rather than what it really is, their own corruption finally exposed. So we just let him walk around? Ghost demanded. After everything? I didn't say that. Malik looked up, his eyes hard. I said we need to be careful, strategic. Kincaid built a system of terror here, his special games to break men's spirits. Now he'll experience that system from the other side. A hush fell over the group as a figure appeared at the yard entrance, Kincaid himself, flanked by 2 guards. Despite the protective escort, he looked exposed, his crisp authority, replaced by inmate vulnerability. There he is, Ghost growled, starting to rise. Malik laid a hand on his arm. Not yet. Just a message then, Ghost insisted. Let him know what's coming. Malik considered, then gave a slight nod. A message only. Nothing physical. Ghost moved away from the table, his purpose clear in every step. The guards escorting Kincaid were distracted by a minor altercation near the weight pile. Convenient timing that suggested planning. Within moments, Ghost had Kincaid backed against the fence, no contact, but close enough that no one else could hear their exchange. From his seat, Malik watched the brief interaction. He couldn't hear the words, but he saw Kincaid's face drain of color, saw the momentary crack in his facade. Good, Malik thought. Let fear do its work first. On the other side of the yard, Officer Troy Blevins conducted his patrol with apparent diligence, but his eyes kept returning to Kincaid, his mentor, his shield, now stripped of everything. This wasn't right, wasn't fair. The brass needed someone to blame, and they'd picked the one man who actually kept this hellhole functioning. As he passed the area where the prison's white supremacist faction exercised, Blevins slowed his pace. Without breaking stride, he allowed a small object to slip from his sleeve into the hand of Jesse Blackwell, the group's leader. "Burner," he murmured. "Encrypted. Only use it for the plan we discussed." Blackwell palmed the contraband phone, smoothly. "You sure you want to do this? No coming back once we start." "They crossed a line, throwing Kincaid to the wolves," Blevins replied, still scanning the yard as if performing routine surveillance. "The way I see it, if they don't stand behind their own, nobody's safe, not even the white shirts. We'll be ready." Blackwell tucked the phone away. "The animals are getting too comfortable anyway." He nodded toward Malik's group. Time they remembered whose house this really is. Lieutenant Dunn sat across from Officer Wilson Young, a 20-year veteran of Coldwater whose tired eyes had seen too much. The interview room was Spartan, just a table and chairs, but the recording equipment was state-of-the-art, a Justice Department upgrade. "Let's be clear," Dunn said, tapping her tablet to life. "You're not the target of this investigation, but I need honest answers." Young shifted uncomfortably. "I've got 5 years till retirement, Lieutenant, and I'm trying to make sure you get there," Dunn replied. "But I can't protect you if you withhold information." She placed a photograph on the table, a young black inmate, face bruised, eyes vacant. "Thomas Richardson, found hanged in his cell last year, ruled a suicide." Young stared at the picture but said nothing. His mother received this letter 2 days before his death. She slid a photocopy across the table. He claimed Sergeant Kincaid had been subjecting him to what he called shower discipline for weeks. Says if anything happened to him, it wasn't suicide. Young's face remained carefully neutral. "Here's what I know," Dunn continued. "For 3 years, a specific group of inmates, predominantly young black men who exhibited what Kincaid's reports termed authority resistance, were routinely selected for special security procedures during shower periods. During these periods, all cameras somehow malfunctioned, all body cam footage was deleted, and multiple inmates later required medical attention for self-inflicted injuries." She leaned forward. 3 of those inmates later died by alleged suicide. All had made prior complaints about Sergeant Kincaid. All complaints were dismissed by Warden Morrell as attempts to manipulate the system. Young's jaw worked silently. "I'm told," Dunn pressed, her voice softening, "that you were present for some of these sessions, that you expressed concerns to your superiors. Is that true, Officer Young?" A long silence filled the room. Finally, Young spoke, his voice barely audible. "Kincaid called them compliance games, said the administration had signed off, that we needed special measures for special problems." He swallowed hard. "It started small, psychological stuff, making them stand for hours, skip meals. But then," he trailed off. "Then what?" Young looked up, his eyes haunted. "It got worse, much worse. But every time I raised concerns, the warden shut it down, said Kincaid's methods were effective, that our incident rates were down. And when inmates died, Morrell would say," his voice caught. She'd say, "That's one less problem for the taxpayers. But now with the feds looking in, suddenly Kincaid's the only bad guy." Young shook his head. "Don't get me wrong, man's a sadist. But he wasn't acting alone. The warden authorized his methods? Not in writing. But she knew. They all knew. Kincaid was just doing what the system wanted, keeping problem inmates in line." Young's fingers drummed nervously on the table. "Now they need a fall guy, and Kincaid's it." Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dunn absorbed this information, her expression darkening. Wilson, what can you tell me about the shower incident with Malik Ramsey? Young paled. I wasn't there that day. But you heard about it. Everybody heard about it. Young lowered his voice. That was different. Kincaid had a special hatred for Ramsey, educated man who wouldn't break. The things he did, he shook his head. That's when I knew we'd crossed a line we couldn't come back from. Dunn made a note. And Officer Blevins? What was his involvement? Blevins? Young's expression hardened. Kincaid's shadow. True believer. Thinks the system's too soft. Watches those racist militia videos on his phone during breaks. He leaned forward. If you put Kincaid in population, while Blevins is still working here, you're signing his death warrant one way or another. What do you mean? Either the inmates get him or... Young glanced at the door. Blevins has friends among the white power gangs. He'll make sure no one talks permanently. As if on cue, a commotion erupted in the corridor outside, shouting, the sound of running feet. Young and Dunn both turned toward the noise. The door burst open. A breathless officer stood there, panic in his eyes. Lieutenant, fight in D block. Multiple inmates, and they've got Kincaid surrounded. The fight in D block wasn't what it appeared. By the time Dunn arrived, breathless and flanked by response officers, the scene had already crystallized into something more ritualized than chaotic. Kincaid stood in the center of a tight circle of inmates, bleeding from a split lip but otherwise unharmed. The true violence was in the silence. Dozens of men standing perfectly still, watching him with unwavering focus. Break it up, ordered the senior officer, his hand hovering near his pepper spray. Back to your cells now. Nobody moved. Not until Malik Ramsey, who had somehow materialized at the edge of the crowd, gave an almost imperceptible nod. Only then did the inmates begin to disperse, moving with deliberate slowness, their eyes never leaving Kincaid. What happened here? Dunn demanded, approaching Kincaid. Nothing, he muttered, wiping blood from his mouth. Just a misunderstanding. But his eyes told a different story, the barely controlled panic of a man who'd just glimpsed his future. The next morning, Kincaid sat alone in the mess hall, the empty seats around him forming an island of isolation. He'd barely touched his breakfast. His appetite vanished after a night of listening to Morris Whitley's labored breathing and his own racing thoughts. He scanned the room constantly, cataloging threats, exits, potential weapons, habits formed over decades of working corrections now twisted into the paranoia of the hunted. When the signal came, he almost missed it. Just a fork tapped twice against a metal tray, then another. Within seconds, the scattered sound coalesced into a rhythm, tap, 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 spreading across the mess hall until hundreds of inmates were marking the same beat. What is this? Kincaid muttered, half to himself. His answer came from a voice behind him, Malik Ramsey, suddenly occupying the seat across the table. They called it cadence, I believe, Malik said, his voice calm, almost conversational. Your innovation, a rhythm to mark the passing of time during compliance exercises. Kincaid's mouth went dry. The tapping continued, growing louder. Malik gestured toward the center aisle between tables. You made Thomas Richardson crawl down that exact path for 45 minutes because he made eye contact with you during count. Crawl or cry, that was the choice you gave him. Those were legitimate disciplinary. You made Martinez stand facing the corner for 6 hours because he had an extra photo of his daughter in his cell. Malik continued, as if Kincaid hadn't spoken. You made Lewis hold stress positions until he soiled himself, then denied him a shower for 3 days. The tapping intensified, inmates now adding a low vocal hum underneath, the same sound Kincaid had taught his officers to use during compliance exercises, a sound designed to disorient, to remove individuality. You're threatening me, Kincaid said, trying to maintain his composure. That's against... I haven't touched you, Malik interrupted. I'm simply having breakfast and reminiscing. He nodded toward the aisle again. They're waiting. For what? For you to crawl. Malik's eyes were impenetrable. Just like you made us crawl. The humming grew louder. Guards at the perimeter shifted uncomfortably but made no move to intervene. Whether from uncertainty or complicity, Kincaid couldn't tell. This is insane, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I'm not. Crawl or cry, Malik said softly. Those were always the options, weren't they? Sometimes both. Kincaid looked around desperately. No help was coming. The exit seemed miles away. And the tapping, that goddamn tapping, the same cadence he'd perfected to break men's spirits, was now burrowing into his brain like a drill. Somewhere in the room, a prisoner began to sing in a low, haunting voice. An old spiritual used in the fields, repurposed for new chains. Others joined in, the sound swelling to fill the cavernous space. With a sick feeling in his gut, Kincaid realized what was happening. They were recreating his methods, his games. Only now, he was the subject. You have about 15 seconds before less diplomatic individuals take charge of this situation, Malik said calmly. I suggest you make your choice. Kincaid's pride warred with his survival instinct. The latter won. With shaking legs, he lowered himself to his hands and knees. A collective exhale rippled through the mess hall. The singing intensified. All the way to the end and back, Malik instructed, his voice now carrying the same dispassionate tone Kincaid had used countless times. And Sergeant, make sure to keep your back straight. Form matters. Red-faced with humiliation, Kincaid began to crawl down the center aisle. With each movement, fragments of memory flashed before him. The faces of men he'd broken this way, the laughter of officers he'd invited to witness the training. The entire mess hall pulsed with sound now, singing, tapping, that maddening hum. Faces blurred as Kincaid crawled, his mind struggling to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be allowed. Yet it continued. 5 minutes. 10. His palms and knees raw against the concrete floor. When he finally reached the end of his journey and looked up, he saw a ghost standing over him, a half-smile on his face and murder in his eyes. The larger man held a mop bucket filled with murky water. No, Kincaid whispered, recognizing another of his special punishments. Ghost's smile widened as he began to tip the bucket. Enough. Malik's voice cut through the cacophony. He now stood at the end of the aisle, one hand raised. We've made our point, he said, looking not at Kincaid but at Ghost. We don't become what we despise. A tense moment passed between the two men, a silent battle of wills. Finally, Ghost stepped back, still holding the bucket. Get up, Malik told Kincaid. It's over. For today. As Kincaid struggled to his feet, legs trembling with exertion and shame, the mess hall fell silent. Hundreds of eyes watched him, not with satisfaction, he realized, but with a kind of solemn recognition. A ritual had been completed. Malik turned to leave, then paused. You know what the difference is between us, Sergeant? When you did these things, you had the power of the state behind you. The blessing of authority. His voice dropped so only Kincaid could hear. We have nothing but the justice of memory. In a forgotten storage closet deep in Coldwater's administrative section, Lieutenant Dunn pried open a rusted locker with a crowbar. The tip of a confidential lead had brought her here, a whispered location from Officer Young before he suddenly requested transfer to another facility. The locker contained a single item, an external hard drive. 20 minutes later, in a secure office commandeered for her investigation, Dunn connected the drive to her laptop. What she found made her blood run cold. Dozens of video files, meticulously labeled by date and inmate number. Body cam footage that supposedly didn't exist. She clicked on one at random. B14 Richardson TO 3092. The video opened on a shower room. Steam obscured parts of the frame, but not enough to hide what was happening. 4 inmates stood facing the wall naked, hands behind their heads. Kincaid paced behind them, a nightstick tapping rhythmically against his palm. "Compliance check," his voice announced cheerfully. "Today we're learning about following simple directions. Simple directions keep everyone safe." What followed was 15 minutes of systematic humiliation, forcing the men to perform degrading acts while reciting prison rules, threatening them with solitary if they failed to comply fast enough, using the hose to spray them down with freezing water when they showed attitude. Throughout, Kincaid maintained the same pleasant, almost sing-song voice. "This is for your own good, gentlemen. Proper attitude adjustment, nothing personal." Dunn forced herself to watch 3 more videos, each worse than the last. By the 4th, she had to stop, rushing to the small attached bathroom to be violently sick. When she returned, pale but composed, she noticed an email notification on her tablet. A confidential source had forwarded her an internal memo, one never meant for her eyes. It was from Warden Morrell to the State Corrections Commissioner, dated 2 weeks ago. Re DOJ Investigation, Damage Control Strategy Commissioner. As discussed, we've identified Sergeant Kincaid as the primary liability in the Richardson-Martinez incidents. While his methods were initially sanctioned under our enhanced compliance protocols, verbal authorization only, we can credibly position him as having exceeded authorized parameters. The attached report has been redacted to limit institutional exposure. All references to administrative knowledge of special disciplinary measures have been removed. We're prepared to characterize Kincaid as a rogue officer whose actions were discovered and addressed through our own internal controls. Our legal team advises that sacrificing one officer, however senior, is preferable to exposing the facility to broader liability. Kincaid's record contains sufficient incidents of questionable judgment that, properly framed, will support this narrative. Recommend immediate administrative leave pending criminal charges. The DOJ will want blood. We're providing it before they can take a deeper look at our operations. E.M. Dunn sat back, a cold fury building inside her, not just at the corruption, but at the calculated cynicism. How many other Kincaids were out there doing exactly what the system wanted while maintaining plausible deniability for their superiors? She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd memorized but never used, the direct line to the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. "This is Lieutenant Dunn," she said when the line connected. "I need to speak with the lead prosecutor on the Coldwater investigation. Immediately." Officer Troy Blevins didn't bother hiding his disgust as he watched the security footage of the mess hall incident. The break room was empty, except for 5 other guards, all white, all hand-selected, for their loyalty. "You seeing this?" he demanded, rewinding the video to show Kincaid crawling. "They humiliate one of our own and we do nothing?" "Orders were to maintain perimeter only," said Peterson, a veteran guard nearing retirement. "Orders from who?" Blevins spat. "That IA bitch, the warden who sold Kincaid out? Since when do we take orders from people who don't have our backs?" He paced the small room, a dangerous energy radiating from his stocky frame. "Ray Kincaid kept this place in line for 20 years, made it safe for us to do our jobs. And the minute the feds start asking questions, they throw him to the wolves." Blevins lowered his voice. "You think any of us are safe after this? You think they won't sacrifice you too when it's convenient?" The other guards shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. "What exactly are you suggesting?" asked Mercer, the youngest of the group. Blevins smiled thinly. "I'm suggesting we remind everyone who really runs Coldwater, who keeps the animals in their cages." "The administration," Peterson began. "The administration is covering their own asses," Blevins cut him off. "Meanwhile, Malik and his crew are taking over. Today it's making Kincaid crawl. Tomorrow, could be any of us." He pulled out his phone, showing them a message from an anonymous number. "Blackwell ready. Brotherhood mobilizing, waiting for signal." "We've got friends here," Blevins continued. "People who understand what's at stake. People willing to restore order." "You're talking about the Aryan Brotherhood," Peterson said flatly. "That's crossing a line, Troy." "Line's already been crossed," Blevins snapped. "You want to wait until they come for you? Or you want to send a message?" Silence fell over the room. Finally, Mercer spoke. "What kind of message?" Blevins' smile widened. the kind that reminds them who's in charge. Kincaid sat alone in his cell that night, Morris Whitley having been mysteriously transferred that afternoon. The silence was almost worse than the old man's incessant commentary. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the mess hall, felt the hard floor under his palms, heard the rhythmic tapping, the singing, the collective breath of hundreds of men watching his humiliation. "It's just the beginning," a voice in his head whispered. "They're only getting started." A sound at his door made him flinch. A folded piece of paper slid under the crack. Another note. With trembling fingers, he unfolded it. 5 words, block letters. "We remember the showers." Kincaid crumpled the paper, a strangled sound escaping his throat as he pressed himself into the corner of his bunk. For the first time in 23 years of corrections work, Ray Kincaid began to cry, silent, shuddering sobs that racked his body and released nothing. The walls of Coldwater, which had witnessed so much suffering at his hands, absorbed his tears without comment or pity. 2 years earlier, April 2009, the steam created a perfect atmosphere. That's what Kincaid always thought as he surveyed the Icho C-block shower room, the mist obscuring clear lines of sight, the acoustics amplifying every sound, the slick tile floors forcing careful movements. They'd turned off the surveillance cameras 20 minutes ago. Routine maintenance, according to the logs he'd personally sign later. "Line up," he ordered, his voice pleasant but firm. The 5 inmates, all young, all black, all flagged for what Kincaid's reports called attitude adjustment, stood naked against the far wall facing the white tile. Water from the overhead showers cascaded over them. Officer Blevins stood at Kincaid's right shoulder, his face flushed with anticipation. 2 other guards blocked the exit. "Today we're addressing respect," Kincaid announced, beginning his ritual, pacing. Respect for the uniform, respect for the institution. The nightstick in his hand tapped a slow rhythm against his palm. Respect for the natural order of things. He stopped behind Malik Ramsey, the newest addition to these sessions, but already Kincaid's favorite subject, a former high school teacher convicted on flimsy conspiracy charges. Ramsey maintained a dignity that Kincaid found personally offensive. "Inmate Ramsey believes he's special," Kincaid continued, circling him now. "Educated, above the rules. Thinks his fancy vocabulary makes him better than the officers tasked with his rehabilitation." Malik's posture remained perfectly straight, eyes fixed forward, expression unreadable. "Hands on your heads, all of you," Kincaid ordered. The inmates complied immediately. "Ramsey, recite the first 10 rules of inmate conduct." Malik began reciting in a steady voice. "Rule 1. Inmates will address all officers with respect." "Rule 2. Louder," Kincaid interrupted. "And squat while you do it." A muscle in Malik's jaw tightened, but he complied, lowering into a squat position while continuing. "Rule 2. Inmates will obey all orders promptly without question." "Lower," Kincaid instructed, smiling now. "Prison rules sound better coming." From a proper position of humility. As Malik continued reciting, Kincaid forced him lower and lower until the man's thighs burned with effort. "Rule 7. Inmates will maintain proper hygiene at all." "I don't like your tone, Ramsey," Kincaid interrupted. "Too much pride still." "Blevins, help me demonstrate the proper attitude." Blevins stepped forward eagerly, grabbing the hose, used for sanitation purposes. He adjusted the nozzle to its highest pressure setting. "Continue reciting," Kincaid ordered as Blevins aimed the hose. "And remember, this is for your own good." The water hit Malik's face with enough force to snap his head back. He choked, sputtered, but somehow maintained his squatting position. "Rule," he gasped, water streaming into his mouth. 8. Inmates will— "I still hear defiance," Kincaid said. "I think Ramsey needs to understand his place more clearly." He glanced at the other inmates, still facing the wall. "The rest of you, turn around. Educational opportunity." The other men reluctantly turned, eyes downcast. "On your knees, Ramsey," Kincaid ordered. Malik hesitated for just a fraction of a second, enough for Kincaid to notice. "That's an infraction," he said softly. "You'll spend a week in solitary for that hesitation." Slowly, Malik lowered onto his knees, the cold tile digging into his skin. "Now," Kincaid said, crouching down to meet Malik's eyes, "let's talk about the natural order of things." What followed was 30 minutes of calculated degradation, forcing Malik to bark like a dog while the hose continued to blast him, making him thank the officers for his correction, ordering him to clean the floor with his bare hands. Through it all, something in Malik's eyes remained unconquered, and that, more than anything, infuriated Kincaid. "You still don't get it, do you?" Kincaid finally said, his voice dropping to a whisper as he leaned in close. "This isn't about rules or respect, this is about power. My power, your powerlessness," he smiled. "I could kill you right here, and the report would say you slipped and hit your head. That's reality." For the first time, Malik spoke outside the script of rules recitation. His voice was raw from the water, but steady. "You could kill my body," he said quietly. "But that's all you can touch." Rage flashed across Kincaid's face, followed quickly by a cold smile. "We'll see about that." He straightened up, addressing the other guards. "Gentlemen, I think Mr. Ramsey needs a more thorough lesson in institutional hygiene, the full protocol." Blevins grinned, reaching for his belt. "With pleasure, Sergeant. And make sure there's nothing left of his pride when you're done," Kincaid added, heading for the door. "I want him broken." As he left, he heard the scuffle begin behind him, the sound of bodies against tile, Blevins' taunting voice. But he didn't look back. He never did. That night, he slept like a baby. Present day. April 2011. "5 minutes, Kincaid," the guard announced, unlocking the cell. Shower block. Kincaid hadn't bathed in 3 days, not since the note about the showers. But the layer of grime coating his skin had become unbearable, his orange jumpsuit stiff with sweat and fear. "Can I request a private shower?" he asked, the words feeling foreign in his mouth, asking, not ordering. "Not in the schedule," the guard replied impassively. "Now or never." Kincaid gathered his toiletries with shaking hands. The guard, Torres, a man who'd once jumped to attention at Kincaid's approach, didn't comment on his former superior's obvious terror, just gestured him into the corridor with professional detachment. The walk to D-Block's shower room stretched like a condemned man's last mile. Each step brought fresh memories of what he'd done in spaces like these, and fresh fears of what might be done to him. Torres stopped outside the shower entrance. 15 minutes, he said, then back to your cell. "You're not coming in?" Kincaid asked, unable to hide the panic in his voice. Torres looked at him blankly. "Not my job to babysit during hygiene? Periods. But standard procedure is for the officer to maintain position outside unless an incident occurs," Torres finished for him. "As you established in the security protocols, Sergeant." A hint of irony colored that last word. With that, Torres took up position beside the door, eyes fixed on the opposite wall. Kincaid stood frozen for a moment before slowly pushing through the door into the steamy interior. The shower room was an open space with multiple stainless steel shower heads protruding from tiled walls. Thankfully, it appeared empty. The hiss of water from the far corner was the only sound. Relief flooded through him as he made his way to the nearest shower head, clutching his soap like a talisman. He stripped quickly, keeping his back to the wall, and stepped under the hot spray. For a few precious moments, the water sluicing over his body felt like absolution. Then the lights went out. Kincaid froze, heart hammering against his ribs. In the darkness, he heard what he'd missed before, the subtle movements of multiple bodies. "Torres!" he shouted, backing against the wall. "Torres!" No response from outside, only the sound of footsteps approaching through the dark, the quiet squeak of wet feet on tile. "You don't want to do this," Kincaid said, his voice cracking. "Whatever you're planning, shut up," a voice growled close to his ear. Hands seized him from both sides, strong, purposeful hands that had clearly done this before. A forearm pressed against his throat, not quite cutting off his air but threatening to. "Remember me, Sergeant?" another voice whispered. "Rodriguez, you had me in here 2 years ago. Made me eat soap while your boy Blevins recorded it on his phone for laughs." "I was doing my job," Kincaid choked out. "Your job," a third voice repeated, quiet with controlled rage. "Was that your job too?" Something pressed into Kincaid's, and a phone, its screen illuminating a grotesque image. A naked inmate on his knees, face bloody, while uniformed officers stood around him. Kincaid recognized himself in the background, watching with a small smile. "Where did you get this?" he gasped. "Blevins liked to keep trophies," Rodriguez said. "Shared them with his Aryan Brotherhood friends. They shared with us. Funny how things get around." The phone disappeared, plunging them back into darkness. "Please," Kincaid whispered, a word he'd rarely used in his life. "I have a family." "So did Thomas Richardson," the first voice said, "before he hung himself after your hygiene lessons." Without warning, Kincaid was forced to his knees, his head yanked back by the hair. "Poetic, isn't it?" Rodriguez said. "Same room, same position, same rules." Water suddenly blasted Kincaid's face from a handheld shower attachment. Freezing cold, high pressure directly into his nose and mouth. He choked, thrashing against the hands that held him immobile. "Compliance check," Rodriguez continued, mimicking Kincaid's jovial tone. "Today we're learning about the natural order of things." The water continued, filling Kincaid's sinuses, his lungs burning for air. This wasn't humiliation anymore. This was execution. "They're going to drown me," he realized through the panic, "and nobody will stop them." His consciousness began to fade, darkness creeping in from the edges. The hands holding him seemed to multiply in his oxygen-deprived hallucination. Then abruptly the water stopped. "That's enough." The new voice was quiet, but carried unmistakable authority. The pressure on Kincaid's throat eased slightly, allowing him to cough violently, water streaming from his nose and mouth. Through tear-blurred eyes, Kincaid saw a flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, illuminating his attackers, Rodriguez, whom he recognized, and 2 others whose faces had been vaguely familiar in the mess hall incident. Behind them stood Malik Ramsey, his expression unreadable. "This isn't what we discussed," Malik said calmly. "Man deserves to die, Teach," Rodriguez replied, not releasing his grip on Kincaid. "You know what he did. To you. To all of us." "I know exactly what he did," Malik said, stepping closer. "Better than anyone." Kincaid, still gasping for breath, met Malik's eyes. What he saw there wasn't mercy, just something more complex than hatred. "3 men killing a naked, defenseless opponent," Malik continued, using the same methods he used, becoming exact replicas of what we despise. He shook his head. "That's not justice. That's surrender." "It's payback," one of the other men insisted. "Payback keeps us trapped in his game," Malik replied. "Playing by his rules. Thinking like him." He lowered his voice. "We're better than that. We have to be." A heavy silence filled the dark space, broken only by Kincaid's ragged breathing. Finally, Rodriguez released him with a disgusted shove. "You're making a mistake, Teach." "Maybe," Malik acknowledged. "But it's mine to make." He gestured toward the door. "Go." The 3 men hesitated, then moved past him one by one. Rodriguez paused at the threshold. "When he kills one of us because you let him live," he said bitterly, "that blood is on your hands too." Then he was gone, leaving Malik and Kincaid alone in the darkness. Kincaid slumped against the wall, naked and shivering, water still streaming from his mouth and nose. Malik stood motionless, the flashlight beam pointed at the floor now, creating a small circle of illumination between them. "Why?" Kincaid finally managed, his voice a broken rasp. Malik's response was barely audible. "Because someone has to break the cycle." He turned to leave, then added without looking back, "Get dressed. This doesn't happen again." Left alone, Kincaid curled into himself, violent tremors racking his body from cold, from fear, from the sudden confrontation with his own mortality. For the first time, he understood what he'd truly been doing all those years. Not maintaining order, not enforcing rules, creating terror, inflicting trauma that would never fully heal. And for the first time, he feared there might be no forgiveness possible for such things. "Your testimony directly contradicts the statement you gave 2 years ago," Lieutenant Dunn said, reviewing her notes. "You understand that making false statements to investigators is a criminal offense?" Marcus Jenkins nodded, his hands tightly clasped on the table between them. The Atlanta diner they'd chosen for this meeting was half empty, ambient noise providing cover for their conversation. 2 years after his release from Coldwater, Jenkins looked older than his 35 years. Exhaustion etched into his face. "I lied before because I was scared," he said quietly. "Kincaid made it clear what would happen if I talked. And now?" Jenkins' eyes flicked toward the entrance, checking again for threats. "Now I got a brother still inside. He says things are changing. Says maybe there's finally a chance for some truth." Dunn slid a photo across the table. The same shower room image Rodriguez had shown Kincaid. "Tell me about this," she said. Jenkins stared at it for a long moment. "Special discipline, that's what they called it. For inmates who showed persistent attitude problems." "And who authorized these sessions?" "Kincaid ran them, but everybody knew the administration signed off. Had to. The cameras being off, the reports disappearing, that needed approval from the top." "Warden Morrell?" Jenkins nodded. She visited the tier once after one of these sessions, saw men who could barely walk, just nodded and moved on. His voice hardened. System working as designed, far as she was concerned. "What happened to you in there?" Dunn asked gently. Jenkins looked away, silent for so long Dunn thought he might not answer. "They break you," he finally said. "Not just your body. Something deeper, make you feel like you're not human anymore." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Then they make you thank them for it." "And after you were released? Why did you disappear instead of testifying?" "Got visited the night before my interview. 3 men, didn't identify themselves. Said they knew where my mother lived, where my kids went to school." Jenkins met her eyes. "Said accidents happen all the time to families of men who don't know when to keep quiet." "Blevins?" Jenkins shrugged. Never saw his face, but yeah, had to be his people. Kincaid's too smart to do his own dirty work. Dunn made a note, then pulled out her tablet. "I need to show you some footage we recovered." She played one of the videos from the hidden hard drive. Jenkins watched without expression, though his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. "That's Richardson," he said when it ended. 2 weeks before he died. "The official report says suicide. Man was definitely murdered," Jenkins said flatly. "Whether by his own hand or theirs doesn't much matter. They killed him either way." Dunn leaned forward. "I need you on record this time, Marcus. No disappearing acts. We're building a case against the entire command structure, not just Kincaid. You got protection?" His eyes held the haunted look of a man who no longer believed in safety. "Federal witness program," Dunn confirmed. "For you and your family." Jenkins considered this, absently rubbing the faded tattoo on his forearm, a remnant of a younger self. "There's something else you should know," he finally said. "Something that happened to Malik Ramsey." "The teacher?" Jenkins nodded grimly. "What they did to him was different. Worse. Kincaid had a special hatred for educated black men. Said they needed extra correction." "Tell me." As Jenkins spoke, Dunn's expression shifted from professional detachment to barely controlled fury. By the time he finished, she was gripping her pen so tightly it threatened to snap. "And there's no footage of this?" she asked. "Would have been too much even for Coldwater to explain away," Jenkins replied. "But every inmate on that tier knows what happened. We heard it, saw what Malik looked like after. Yet he never filed a complaint. Man like Malik plays the long game," Jenkins said. "Knew the system was rigged. Knew his time would come. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Guess he was right. Dunn collected her materials, mind already racing through the legal implications. You'll testify to all of this? She pressed. On the record? Under oath? Jenkins looked at her with tired eyes. Lady, I've been carrying this weight for 2 years. Seeing Malik broken like that and not being able to do a damn thing about it. He straightened his shoulders slightly. Yeah, I'll testify. Whether it makes any difference is on you. They're hanging us out to dry. Blevins fumed, pacing the cramped break room. All of us. He slapped a document onto the table, an internal memo that had been circulating among senior staff. 6 officers' names appeared under the heading, Personnel under review, including Blevins and at the top Kincaid. Where did you get this? Peterson asked, scanning the list with growing alarm. I have my sources, Blevins snapped. The point is, Morell's cutting a deal, offering us up to save herself. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. 5 white officers, all facing potential criminal charges for following what they'd understood to be sanctioned procedures. This is what happens when we let them take control, Blevins continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial pitch. First Kincaid, now us. Next thing, they'll be running the whole damn prison. They? Mercer asked, though everyone knew exactly who Blevins meant. The animals, Blevins spat. Malik and his crew. The Brotherhood was right. Race war's already happening and we're losing because we don't even realize we're fighting. He pulled out his phone, swiping to a series of images, printouts appearing under cell doors throughout the facility. Crude, but effective propaganda. Guard names labeled as race traitors, calls for white inmates to stand up for their brothers in uniform, warnings about black supremacy taking over the prison system. You've been distributing these? Peterson asked, horrified. Are you insane? I'm fighting back, Blevins replied, eyes fever-bright. And it's working. The Brotherhood's membership has doubled in 2 weeks. Blackwell says they're ready to move whenever we give the signal. Move to do what exactly? Mercer asked. Blevins' smile was chilling. To remind everyone what happens when the natural order is disrupted. Restore proper authority. Peterson stood up, shaking his head. I'm out. This isn't maintaining order, Troy. This is inciting a riot. It's self-preservation, Blevins countered. Morell just got summoned to testify before a federal commission next week. You think she won't sell every one of us out to save her own skin? He looked around the room, cataloging the fear on his colleagues' faces. We have 2 choices, he continued. Stand together and show them who really runs Coldwater, or go down one by one while Malik Ramsey and his thugs laugh at us. And Kincaid? Mercer asked. Where does he fit in all this? Blevins' expression hardened. Ray knew the risks. He's a casualty. Unfortunate but unavoidable. So you're abandoning him, Peterson said, disgust evident in his voice, after all he did for you. I'm being practical, Blevins replied coldly. Something you should try if you want to keep your pension, or your freedom. Peterson headed for the door but paused with his hand on the knob. You realize if this goes sideways, we'll all be sharing a cell block with Kincaid, right? Blevins' smile returned sharp as a blade. Not if there's nobody left to testify against us. After Peterson left, the remaining guards exchanged uneasy glances, but nobody else moved to leave. Fear, Blevins knew, was a powerful motivator, and right now, fear was working in his favor. He pulled out his phone again and sent a text to Blackwell. Morell testifying next week. Accelerate timeline. Ready to move in 72 hours. The response came almost immediately. Brotherhood ready. Death before dishonor. Blevins allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. By this time next week, the natural order would be restored. And if some blood had to be spilled in the process, well, that had always been the cost of maintaining civilization against barbarism. In his cell that night, Malik sat motionless on his bunk, eyes closed, trying to meditate. But peace eluded him, his mind circling back to the shower room, to Kincaid's broken face, to his own unexpected intervention. The cell door slid open. Malik didn't need to look to know who it was. You should have let them finish it, Ghost said without preamble, his tall frame filling the doorway. If I had, what would that make us? Malik replied, still not opening his eyes. It would make us one problem lighter. Ghost stepped inside, lowering his voice. The whole block's talking, Teach. They're saying you've gone soft, that when it came time to deliver justice you flinched. Now Malik looked at him, his gaze steady. Justice isn't the same as revenge. Tell that to Richardson's mother, Ghost countered. Tell that to Martinez's kids growing up without a father because the man killed himself after what Kincaid did. To him. Malik stood, meeting Ghost's intensity with calm. You think I don't carry them with me? Every day? I think you're letting principles get in the way of what needs doing, Ghost said. Man like Kincaid doesn't deserve mercy. It wasn't about what he deserves. It was about who we are. Malik moved to the small window of his cell, looking out at the darkening sky. The minute we start using his methods, thinking his thoughts, we become him. And he wins, even in defeat. Ghost was silent for a moment, his frustration palpable. Dunn's building a case, Malik continued. Justice Department's involved now. Things are changing, Ghost. Real change, not just trading one form of violence for another. You really believe that? The skepticism in Ghost's voice cut deep. After everything you've seen, everything you've suffered? Malik closed his eyes briefly, memories of his own time in the showers threatening to overwhelm him. The humiliation, the degradation, the things done to break not just his body but his soul. I have to, he finally said. Otherwise, what am I fighting for? Just an endless cycle of retribution? Ghost moved closer, lowering his voice further. You should know. Rodriguez and his crew aren't the only ones planning something. White guards are stirring things up. Blevins is behind it. What kind of something? Don't have details yet, but there's Brotherhood activity in every block now. Pamphlets circulating. Meetings during yard time. Ghost's expression darkened. They're preparing for war, Teach. And they're not planning to take prisoners. Malik absorbed this information, his mind already calculating potential responses. Defensive positions. Vulnerable allies who would need protection. Keep our people calm, he instructed. No provocations. No isolated movements, and find Preach. I need his network watching for any unusual guard deployments. Ghost nodded, but hesitated at the door. Kincaid, he said. If things go bad, if it comes down to him or us, then we do what's necessary, Malik conceded. But on our terms, not theirs. After Ghost left, Malik returned to his meditation position, but peace remained elusive. The weight of leadership had never felt heavier. In the adjacent cell block, separated by concrete and steel, but connected by the invisible threads of fate, Ray Kincaid also sat awake, haunted by different demons. Water, always the water, filling his lungs. The powerlessness, the certainty of death. And then mercy, from the last place he had any right to expect it. Trembling hands reached for his hidden contraband, a stubby pencil and scrap of paper. He began to write, the words spilling out in desperate, jagged script. I deserve to die for what I've done, but if I do, the truth dies with me. And the system that made me possible continues. He paused, considering his next words carefully. Malik, I know you can get this to Dunn. Tell her I'm ready to talk about everything, the showers, Morell's orders, the deaths, all of it, before it's too late. The morning sun cast long shadows across Coldwater's recreation yard as Jason Winters, a 19-year-old first-timer serving 5 years for drug possession, made his way toward the basketball court. He didn't notice Officer Blevins watching. Him from the guard tower didn't see the subtle nod exchanged with Blackwell near the weight pile. Didn't sense the choreographed movements closing in around him. Winters was halfway to the court when it happened. A seemingly random collision with a larger inmate, followed by a sharp pain in his side, so quick that the guards didn't react until he was already on the ground, blood pooling beneath him. Weapon! Someone shouted. Chaos erupted, guards rushed forward, inmates scattered. Through fading consciousness, Winters saw Blackwell backing away, saw a blood-stained shank being passed to another inmate, a black man from Malik's tier. "It was them!" Blackwell shouted, pointing. "Richardson's crew!" As Winter's world went dark, a siren began to wail across the yard. "They're calling it a hit ordered by Malik," Preach said grimly, his large frame hunched forward in the library's back corner. Word spreading it was retaliation for the kid talking to guards about shower discipline. Ghost's face remained impassive. Winters never talked to anybody. He'd only been here 3 months. Doesn't matter. Story's already taken hold. Preach looked around the nearly empty library. Brotherhood's using it to recruit, saying Malik's people are eliminating witnesses. "Setup," Ghost muttered. "Obvious setup." "Of course it is. But with Winters critical in the infirmary and that shank found near Calvin's bunk, administration has all they need to move against us." Ghost's eyes narrowed. "Calvin had nothing to do with this." "You know that. I know that." Preach shook his head. "Question is, what's really happening here? Why now?" Ghost leaned closer. "Dunn's been interviewing witnesses, building a case against the administration. Morell's testifying to the feds in 3 days." Understanding dawned on Preach's face. "They're creating a distraction. Race riot would shut down any investigation, at least temporarily. And give them cause to clean house," Ghost added. "Lock up troublemakers, eliminate witnesses." A sound at the library entrance made both men look up. Officer Torres stood there, unusually tense. "Matthews," he called. "Warden wants to see you. Now." Preach exchanged a quick glance with Ghost. "Tell Malik to be ready," he murmured. "This is just the beginning." Lieutenant Dunn slammed the case file onto Warden Morell's desk. "A 19-year-old kid bleeding out in your infirmary? And you're using it to justify a lockdown before your federal testimony? That timing seemed convenient to you?" Morell remained composed, manicured nails tapping lightly on her desk. "A violent incident occurred. I'm following protocol." "Like you followed protocol with Kincaid's shower sessions?" Something flashed behind Morell's carefully neutral expression. "I've already been fully transparent about Sergeant Kincaid's unsanctioned activities." "Transparent?" Dunn laughed bitterly. "I have 6 witnesses and recovered footage saying you personally approved his methods." She leaned forward. "You're planning to scapegoat him to save yourself. Question is, how far are you willing to go?" "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." Dunn pointed toward the window overlooking the yard, now empty under lockdown. "That stabbing was orchestrated by someone with access and authority, someone desperate to disrupt my investigation." Morell stood slowly, smoothing her blazer. "Lieutenant, you should be careful about making accusations without evidence." "I have evidence. Officer Wilson Young, Marcus Jenkins, the hard drive from Kincaid's locker." Dunn matched her stance. "And as of this morning, Ray Kincaid himself." That landed. Morell's composure cracked slightly. "Kincaid is hardly a credible witness. Maybe not alone, but his testimony, combined with the others?" Dunn shook her head. "The Justice Department isn't just looking at excessive force anymore, Warden. They're investigating institutional corruption, criminal conspiracy. Your signature is on every authorization form." Morell was silent for a long moment, calculation visible behind her eyes. "What do you want?" she finally asked. "The truth, starting with what really happened today." Morell moved to the window, looking out at her domain. "Coldwater houses the worst offenders in the state, Lieutenant. Maintaining order requires flexibility." "You mean brutality?" "I mean realism." Morell turned back. Kincaid understood that. He did what was necessary, what the state tacitly wanted but couldn't officially sanction. Torturing inmates was necessary? Breaking dangerous men before they broke the system was necessary. A hint of defensiveness crept into Morell's voice. Yes, his methods became excessive. Yes, I should have reined him in sooner, but he was effective. "Until the feds started looking," Dunn said softly. "Then he became expendable." Morell didn't deny it. The system requires sacrifices sometimes. And today's stabbing? Another necessary sacrifice? A slight hesitation. I had nothing to do with that. But you know who did. Morell's gaze slipped away. Officer Blevins has been increasingly unstable since Kincaid's removal. I've attempted to contain the situation. By letting him orchestrate violence, Dunn demanded, playing with men's lives. By trying to maintain control during a transition, Morell snapped. You have no idea what it takes to run a place like this. The constant balancing of competing forces, A knock interrupted them. Morell's assistant appeared at the door, visibly nervous. Ma'am, there's been another incident. D block. An officer has been attacked. Dunn and Morell locked eyes, the implication clear. The retaliation had begun. Kincaid sat alone in a holding cell near the administrative offices, hands cuffed to the table, bolted to the floor. His note to Dunn had worked. She'd had him moved from general population for his own protection after the yard stabbing. The door opened and Kincaid looked up to see Malik entering, also in restraints but moving with a dignity Kincaid had never managed to destroy. Quite a reunion, Kincaid said, attempting nonchalance despite his racing pulse. What brings the great Malik Ramsey to my humble accommodations? Malik sat across from him, studying him with those unnerving eyes. You offered information to Lieutenant Dunn about the showers. And other things, Kincaid confirmed. Turns out self-preservation is a powerful motivator. You're turning on your own people. They turned on me first. Kincaid leaned forward as far as his restraints. Aloud. Morell, the state, the whole system. They wanted me to keep order by any means necessary. Then they threw me to the wolves when it became inconvenient. Poor you, Malik said softly, without inflection. Kincaid's bravado faltered under that steady gaze. Look, we both know I'm a dead man if I go back to general population. Testifying is my only chance. And you think that makes us allies? I think we both want the truth exposed. Kincaid swallowed. Different reasons, same goal. Malik was silent for a long moment. You know what's happening out there? The story being spread about Winters? That your people ordered a hit? Yeah, I heard. Blevins' work, obviously. Not just Blevins. The whole system circling the wagons. Malik leaned back. You were useful to them until you weren't. Now I'm the convenient villain. Something twisted in Kincaid's gut, a feeling uncomfortably like shame. I can help, he said abruptly. Tell Dunn what really happened with Winters. Confirm the setup. Why would you do that? Because we're in the same boat now, Kincaid replied. Both expendable to people like Morell? Malik's laugh was soft but genuine. We are not the same, Kincaid. Not even close. Maybe not. But right now we need each other. Kincaid pushed ahead. You control the black inmates. I know where the bodies are buried. Together we can bring the whole corrupt system down. Malik studied him with something like pity. Still playing games. Still manipulating. You haven't learned anything, have you? I've learned I don't want to die in here. That's not enough, Malik stood. When you understand what you've really done, what you've taken from men that can never be restored, then maybe we talk. As he turned to leave, Kincaid called after him. It's too late for redemption, Ramsey, for either of us. Malik paused at the door. It's never about redemption, Sergeant. It's about truth and justice. His voice softened. Two things you never understood. Ghost moved silently through the maintenance corridor connecting D block to the central hub. Technically off limits to inmates, the narrow passage had been his secret route for years, courtesy of a sympathetic janitor with keys. The lockdown had triggered Malik's contingency plan, key allies positioned strategically. Throughout the facility, communications channels established, defensive preparations made. Ghost's mission was reconnaissance. Assess guard deployments, identify Brotherhood movements, report back. He froze at a sound ahead, voices in the connecting corridor. Tonight, during shift change, a guard was saying. Blevins, Ghost realized. Blackwell's people ready? Another voice asked. Armed and positioned. When the power cuts, they move against Ramsey's crew. Main target is Malik himself. Blevins' voice hardened. No witnesses, understand? Administration needs this to look like gang violence, pure and simple. And Kincaid? Unfortunate casualty of inmate unrest. A cold chuckle. Dunn's star witness eliminated before he can testify. Perfect tragedy. Ghost backed away silently, mind racing. This wasn't just a distraction anymore. It was an extermination plan. In the prison chapel, Preach sat across from Lieutenant Dunn, both speaking in hushed tones despite being alone. 43 suicide attempts in 3 years, Preach said, sliding a handwritten list toward her. 17 successful, all after Kincaid's special discipline sessions. Dunn scanned the names, recognizing many from her investigation. How did you compile this? I counsel the survivors. I prepare the dead for burial. Preach's eyes were haunted. Some left notes. Most couldn't bring themselves to speak about what happened. The shame was too deep. I need documentation, Andre. Evidence that links these deaths directly to the shower incidents. Look at the medical reports. The pattern is there. Self-harm concentrated in certain blocks under certain guards. The administration called it contagious behavior, but it was systematic torture breaking men's spirits. Dunn made notes connecting points in her complex investigation. I need to move quickly. After today's incidents, I'm not sure how much time we have. Less than you think, Preach said gravely. Ghost just got word. Blevins is planning something tonight. Using the Brotherhood to eliminate witnesses. Malik, Kincaid, anyone who might testify. Dunn looked up sharply. How reliable is this information? Ghost heard it directly. Blevins was discussing it with another guard. I need to get Kincaid transferred immediately, and protection for Malik. Malik won't leave his people, Preach interrupted, not with violence brewing. But there might be another way. He outlined a plan, risky, unorthodox, possibly career-ending for Dunn, but also their best chance to preserve both witnesses and evidence. You're asking me to circumvent the entire chain of command, Dunn said when he finished. I'm asking you to choose justice over procedure. Preach held her gaze. Isn't that why you started this investigation? Before Dunn could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. A voice over the PA system announced, Code Red, all blocks. Repeat, Code Red. This is not a drill. All personnel to emergency stations. They exchanged grim looks. The implications clear. Whatever Blevins had planned was already beginning. Make your choice, Lieutenant, Preach said urgently. Now. Dunn hesitated only briefly before reaching for her radio. This is Lieutenant Dunn. I need a secure channel to the Justice Department Task Force Authorization Code Delta 97. As Preach watched, something shifted in her eyes. Professional detachment giving way to moral clarity. And get me a secure escort to bring inmate Ramsey to my office, she added. Immediately. Outside the chapel windows, they could see guards running across the yard, riot gear being distributed. The fortress of Coldwater was locking down, battening its hatches, against the storm about to break. But within its walls, the real war, for truth, for justice, for the soul of the system itself, was just beginning. Malik sat across from Lieutenant Dunn in the rarely used interview room tucked away in the administrative wing. Outside, Coldwater was in full lockdown, inmates confined to cells, armed response teams positioned at strategic points, the air thick with tension. But here, in this small space with its buzzing fluorescent light and scarred table, time seemed suspended. I appreciate you agreeing to meet, Dunn said, her voice low despite the room's soundproofing. Did I have a choice? Malik's expression remained impassive. We both know you always have choices. Dunn studied him. That's what makes you dangerous to people like Morell. A hint of a smile touched Malik's lips. Is that how you see me? Dangerous? I see you as necessary, she replied. Right now, you're the only person who can prevent a bloodbath. Malik leaned back, his restraints clinking softly. You overestimate my influence. No, I don't. She placed a folder on the table between them. 7 suicide attempts in the last 2 years. All men from your educational program. 3 deaths, all. After Kincaid's special attention, she met his eyes. Yet none of your closest associates ever broke, no matter what was done to them. What's your point? My point is that your people listen to you, follow you, trust you. She leaned forward. I need that trust right now. For what? To secure testimony that will bring down not just Kincaid but the entire system that enabled him. Morrell, the state supervisors, all of them. Malik studied her, weighing her sincerity. And what do my people get in return for this? Trust? Protection, limited immunity for those who testify, and my personal guarantee that what happened in the showers will never happen again. Guarantee? Malik's laugh held no humor. You're one lieutenant investigating a corrupt prison in a corrupt system. Your guarantees don't carry much weight. Maybe not alone, Dunn conceded. But I'm not alone anymore. She slid a document across the table, a Justice Department letterhead with the header, Coldwater Supermax, Authorization for Special Investigation. Malik scanned it, his expression unchanging. Pretty words on official paper, we've seen those before. This is different. Dunn's voice took on an edge of urgency. The Attorney General himself is involved now. They're not just looking at Coldwater, they're looking at the entire Mississippi correction system. Why should I believe you? Because I'm sitting here risking my career to protect witnesses instead of following Warden Morrell's containment protocols. Her eyes held his. Because I've seen the videos, read the reports, interviewed the survivors. And because right now, those animals in guard uniforms are planning to murder you, Kincaid, and anyone else who might testify. Malik was silent for a long moment. What exactly do you need from me? Stand down your people. No retaliation for Winters, even though it was a setup. Give me time to extract key witnesses, including you, before Blevins can move. I'm not leaving my men. You can't protect them if you're dead, Dunn countered. And you will be dead if you stay on that tier tonight. Malik's jaw tightened. My people first. Ghost. Preach. Calvin, he's still in segregation for a shank that wasn't his. I'm working on it, but I need your cooperation. Dunn lowered her voice. And I need your testimony about what happened to you in the showers. Something flickered in Malik's eyes, a shadow of old pain quickly suppressed. That's not negotiable, she added gently. Without your direct testimony, Kincaid walks. Morrell walks. The whole system continues. You have no idea what you're asking, Malik said quietly. I think I do. Dunn's professional mask slipped, revealing genuine compassion. I've spent 15 years in corrections believing I was serving justice. Now I realize I've been complicit in a machine designed to dehumanize. She shook her head. I can't undo that, but I can try to fix what's broken. Some things can't be fixed, Lieutenant. Only survived. Then help others survive. She pushed the Justice Department document toward him again. This is real, but it only works if men like you speak the truth, no matter how painful. Malik looked away, his gaze fixed on the small window high in the wall. Outside, the sky was darkening as evening approached, the most dangerous time in any prison. Do you know what it costs? He finally asked, his voice barely audible. To lead men in a place like this? To give them hope when there is none? To maintain dignity when the entire system is designed to strip it away? Dunn waited, sensing he needed to speak more than she needed to respond. Every day I tell them to be better than their circumstances, to refuse the path of violence, to maintain their humanity. A bitter smile crossed his face. And for what? So the Kincaids of the world can torture us with impunity? So administrators can look the other way? For the truth, Dunn said simply, because without it nothing changes. Malik turned back to her, his eyes carrying the weight of years. I watched Thomas Richardson break after what Kincaid did to him. Bright kid, Full scholarship before a possession charge put him here. Kincaid targeted him especially. Educated black men were his favorite subjects. His voice hardened. 2 weeks after his shower discipline, Thomas hanged himself. Left a note saying he couldn't live with the shame. I know, Dunn said softly. I read the file. There were dozens like him. Men who survived the streets, survived the courts, only to be broken by calculated humiliation. Malik leaned forward. That's what your system does, Lieutenant. It doesn't just incarcerate bodies. It destroys souls. Then help me change it, she urged. Starting here, starting now. The radio on Dunn's belt crackled to life. Lieutenant Dunn, priority alert from medical. Inmate Kincaid has attempted self-harm. Medical response team en route. Dunn and Malik exchanged a look of shared understanding. It seems your star witness has made his choice, Malik observed. We need to move quickly, Dunn said, gathering her files. Are you with me? Malik considered for a long moment before nodding once. On one condition, my people get transferred first, before any testimony, before anything. I'll make it happen, Dunn promised, standing. Wait here, I need to check on Kincaid. As she reached the door, Malik spoke again. He won't die, you know. Men like Kincaid don't have the courage to finish what they start. Dunn paused. What makes you so sure? Because his entire life has been about inflicting pain, not enduring it. Malik's voice was steady. He wants rescue, attention, a way out that doesn't require facing what he's done. Kincaid lay on a medical gurney, wrists bandaged, an IV dripping fluids into his arm. The suicide attempt had been methodical but ultimately half-hearted, deep, enough to bleed dramatically, not deep enough to ensure death. Cutting across instead of down, the medical technician murmured to Dunn as she entered. Amateur hour. He didn't really want to die. Dunn dismissed the tech and pulled a chair next to Kincaid's bed. His eyes fluttered open, unnaturally bright, against his pale face. Come to finish the job, he asked, his voice weak but still carrying that edge of sarcasm. Why did you do it, Ray? He looked away. You know why. Words out, I'm talking to you. Blevins has put a target on my back. It was only a matter of time. So suicide seemed like the better option? Seemed more dignified than what was coming. His gaze drifted to the ceiling. Did you hear what they did to Martinez after the showers? Hung himself with his bedsheet, but not before writing every rule he'd broken on his own skin with a smuggled pen. Hundreds of them, covering his entire body. Dunn said nothing, letting him continue. You think I want to end up like that? Or Richardson? Or any of the others? A bitter laugh escaped him. At least this way I choose the exit. There's another option, Dunn said quietly. Full testimony. Justice Department protection. A chance to expose the whole system. And, spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, no thanks. Then what do you want, Ray, really? Kincaid was silent for a long time, the only sound the steady beep of the heart monitor. I want to understand, he finally said, his voice barely audible. How it happened. How I became this. Became what? A monster. The word seemed to pain him physically. I didn't start that way, you know. 23 years ago, I was just a guy doing a job, following the program, maintaining order. And then it changes you. Little by little. The power. The fear in their eyes. His voice caught. Until one day you're standing in a shower room watching a man broken beneath you and feeling nothing. Less than nothing. Satisfaction. Dunn studied him, searching for manipulation but finding only exhaustion and defeat. Help me understand something, Ray. Why Malik? Why did you target him so specifically? A shadow crossed Kincaid's face. Because he wouldn't break. Everyone breaks eventually. That's what I told my officers. But Ramsey, no matter what I did, he kept that look in his eyes, like he could see right through me. His voice dropped, like he knew I was hollow inside, The door opened, and Preach Matthews entered, nodding briefly to Dunn before turning his attention to Kincaid. "I'll give you a few minutes," Dunn said, standing. "Think about my offer, Ray. Full testimony in exchange for protection." As she left, she heard Preach's deep voice begin. "You've reached a crossroads, Sergeant. Time to choose your path." Night had fallen across Coldwater. In the administrative wing, Malik waited alone, the restraints finally removed from his wrists. Down the corridor, Kincaid was being moved to a secure room under medical supervision. The door opened and Dunn entered, her face drawn with fatigue but her eyes clear. "Your people are being transferred as we speak," she said without preamble. "Ghost, Calvin, and 4 others. They'll be at Jackson Correctional by morning, officially for their own protection during facility maintenance. And Preach? He's staying. His choice. Says his ministry is needed here now more than ever." Malik nodded, unsurprised. "Kincaid?" "Stabilized. Preach spoke with him." Dunn sat across from him. "He's agreed to testify, to provide everything. Records, names, dates, the works. But," Dunn sighed, "but he has one condition. Before he gives his official statement, he wants to speak with you. Alone." "Why?" "He wouldn't say exactly. Something about understanding the cost." She studied Malik carefully. "You don't have to do this. We have enough without him." "No, you don't," Malik replied calmly. "Not to bring down the whole system. You need the architect himself to testify against his creation. And you're willing to face him after everything?" Malik considered this. "I've faced him at his most powerful. I think I can handle him at his weakest." Dunn nodded slowly. "I'll arrange it for tomorrow morning. Secure room, no recording, just the 2 of you. And after you both give your statements, then you join your people at Jackson to await the federal case." She hesitated. "Assuming Coldwater is still standing by morning." "What do you mean?" "Blevins hasn't abandoned his plans, just delayed them." Her expression darkened. "We've intercepted communications. The Brotherhood is still mobilizing. They see the transfers as weakness, proof the administration is siding with the enemy." "And Morrell?" "Officially following containment protocol. Unofficially." Dunn shook her head. "I think she's hoping the problem eliminates itself before her testimony." Malik absorbed this information silently. "One more thing," Dunn added. "The Justice Department is sending a team first thing tomorrow. Whatever Blevins is planning, he's running out of time, which makes him more dangerous." "I understand." Malik's calm was unshakable. "I'll speak with Kincaid, get your testimony, but Lieutenant?" His eyes held hers. "When this is over, remember, real justice isn't just about punishing the guilty. It's about healing what's broken. Is that even possible, after everything that's happened here?" Malik's smile was tinged with sadness. "I have to believe it is. Otherwise, what are we fighting for?" As Dunn escorted him back to his temporary holding cell, the lights throughout Coldwater flickered. Briefly, a warning of the storm still to come. The interview room was stripped to essentials. A table, 2 chairs, nothing that could be weaponized. No cameras, no recording devices, no observers. Just 2 men who represented opposite sides of a system built on control and subjugation, face to face at last. Kincaid sat hunched, hands resting on the table, bandages stark white against his skin. He looked diminished, his former authority reduced to a fragile shell. Across from him, Malik remained straight-backed, composed, revealing nothing. For nearly 5 minutes, neither spoke. The silence stretched between them like a living thing charged with history, with pain, with unspoken accusations. "Thank you for coming," Kincaid finally said, his voice rough. Malik nodded once but offered no words. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Kincaid continued. "I know that's not possible." "Then what do you want?" Malik's tone was level, revealing nothing. Kincaid's eyes flicked up, then away. "To tell you something no one else knows." He took a shuddering breath. About why you're really here, in Coldwater. A subtle tension rippled through Malik's posture. I'm here because a corrupt system needed a convenient scapegoat. No. Kincaid's voice dropped lower. You're here because I put you here. The air between them seemed to thicken. Explain, Malik said, the single word carrying the weight of years. Your student, Marcus Williams, the one who allegedly had drugs and a weapon in his locker? Kincaid finally met Malik's eyes. I planted them. Had Officer Peterson search the locker. Made sure you were implicated as the supplier. For the first time. Malik's composure cracked. A muscle worked in his jaw, his hands unconsciously clenching on the table. Why? The word emerged as barely more than a whisper. Because you were dangerous. Kincaid looked down at his bandaged wrists. Not to the community, to the narrative. A black educator reaching at-risk kids, turning lives around, disproving everything the system was built on. His laugh was hollow. My brother-in-law was the assistant DA. One phone call, one planted stash, and the problem was solved. Malik's breathing had become shallow, controlled with visible effort. Marcus was 17. Honor roll. College scholarship. I know. He's serving 15 years in Parchment now. I know that too. Malik stood abruptly, turning away to face the wall, hands pressed against the concrete as if to ground himself. The revelation had struck deeper than all the physical abuse ever had. A betrayal so complete it threatened to unravel the careful control he'd maintained for years. 3,412 days, Malik said, still facing the wall. That's how long I've been inside, every day asking myself what I did wrong, what I missed, how I failed that boy. His voice caught, while you went home to your family each night knowing. Kincaid remained silent, watching the impact of his confession. When Malik turned back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears, but his voice was steady. Why tell me this now? Because you deserve the truth. And because I'm done everything, names, dates, recordings, documentation of who authorized what. Kincaid swallowed hard. Your case will be among them. The evidence of the frame-up is in a file in my home safe. Malik slowly returned to his seat, studying the broken man before him. You understand what you're saying? You'll be confessing to multiple felonies. I know. Kincaid met his gaze. My career is over either way. Might as well try to set something, right before the end. And you think this confession balances the scales? After everything you've done? No. The word hung between them, naked in its simplicity. Nothing balances those scales. He hesitated. I need to understand something. How did you survive it? The showers, everything I did to break you. How are you still whole? Malik considered the question, weighing how much truth to offer this man who had destroyed so many lives. I'm not whole, he finally said. None of us are after what happens in places like this. But I had something you never did. What's that? Purpose beyond power. Community beyond control. A ghost of a smile touched Malik's lips, and the knowledge that no matter what you did to my body, you couldn't touch what mattered. Your soul, Kincaid said softly, remembering Malik's words. From years ago. My truth, Malik corrected. The truth that this system isn't about justice or rehabilitation. It's about breaking people who remind society of its failures. He leaned forward slightly. Men like you are just the instruments, disposable when no longer useful. Something flickered in Kincaid's eyes. Recognition, perhaps. Or the beginning of understanding. There's more, he said, voice dropping. About Morel. About the state administration. A program they called Attitude Adjustment for Problematic Demographics. Officially sanctioned, unofficially denied. He exhaled slowly. I have documentation. Audio recordings of planning meetings. You were recording them? Insurance policy. Kincaid's smile was bitter. Never thought I'd need it. Turns out loyalty in this system only flows upward. Malik absorbed this. You'll give all of this to Dunn? Yes. Why? The real reason. Kincaid stared at his bandaged wrists. Because I can't live with it anymore. The faces, the sounds, Richardson crying while we... He cut himself off. I see them when I close my eyes, hear them in the silence. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and unexpected. I could kill you right now, Malik said suddenly, his voice conversational. Everyone would understand. No witnesses, perfect opportunity for justified revenge. Kincaid didn't flinch. I know. Part of you wants that, doesn't it? An end to the faces, the sounds. Maybe. Kincaid looked up, something like acceptance in his eyes. But it wouldn't help the others. The ones still trapped in the system. My death changes nothing. Malik studied him for a long moment. No, it doesn't. He stood again, but this time moved toward the door. I'll testify. About everything. The showers, the frame-up. All of it. As his hand reached for the door, Kincaid spoke again. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. But I need to know, is there any coming back from this? From being what I've been? Malik paused, not turning. That's not for me to say. He glanced back over his shoulder. But I think the fact that you're asking the question is your first step away from the monster you became. Lieutenant Dunn watched as the Justice Department team coordinated with state police, transforming Coldwater's administrative wing into a command center. Boxes of evidence were being cataloged, witnesses interviewed in multiple rooms, phones ringing constantly. We've secured the files, Kincaid mentioned, a federal agent informed her. Preliminary review confirms his claims about the state-sanctioned program. Dunn nodded. Exhaustion etched in her face. Anne Morell? In custody since 0600. No bail. The DA is already talking plea deal in exchange for testimony against her superiors. Kincaid? Being processed for transfer to federal holding. His formal statement runs to 78 pages. The agent looked impressed despite himself. Names, dates, authorization codes. He held nothing back. And Malik Ramsey? Just completed his deposition. He's scheduled for transfer to Jackson within the hour, as you arranged. The agent checked his notes. Judge Taylor is already reviewing the evidence of his wrongful conviction. Given Kincaid's admission and the corroborating documentation, I'd say Mr. Ramsey will be a free man within weeks. Dunn felt a weight lift slightly from her shoulders. And the situation within the prison? The agent's expression darkened. That's where things get complicated. Officer Blevins has barricaded himself in D Block with 6 other guards and approximately 40 inmates, mostly Brotherhood affiliated. He's demanding immunity from prosecution and safe passage out of the facility. Hostages? Not yet confirmed, but we believe 3 medical staff may be trapped inside. Dunn closed her eyes briefly. After all they'd accomplished, to have it, end in bloodshed would be unbearable. Let me talk to him, she said, opening her eyes. He knows me. Might listen. Too risky, the agent replied. We have tactical teams positioning for entry. Standard protocol for... Forget standard protocol. Dunn's voice hardened. That's what created this mess in the first place. If we go in guns blazing, people will die. And everything we've worked for, everything Malik and the others risked their lives to expose, gets overshadowed by violence. A new voice joined the conversation. She's right. They turned to see Preach Matthews being escorted by 2 officers, no longer in restraints. Who authorized? The agent began. I did, Dunn interrupted. Mr. Matthews has unique insights into the prison dynamics. We need his expertise. Preach nodded his thanks. Blevins is desperate, but he's not stupid. He knows the game is over. What he wants now is audience, significance. Meaning? He wants his grievances heard, his truth acknowledged. Preach's expression was grave. Let me talk to him, along with Lieutenant Dunn. We represent the 2 sides of this conflict in, His mind. The agent looked skeptical but pulled out his radio. I'll run it up the chain. But don't expect... An explosion rocked the building, distant but powerful enough to rattle windows. D-Block East Wing, someone shouted. They've breached the armory. The next minutes were chaos. Tactical teams mobilizing, radios crackling. With urgent updates, the wail of emergency sirens. Through it all, Dunn found herself moving with Preach toward D-Block, drawn by some shared understanding that the next moments would define everything they'd fought for. At the security checkpoint, they were stopped by armed federal agents. No one goes in, the lead agent ordered. We have an active hostage situation. You have scared men making their last stand, Preach countered. Let us try to end this peacefully. The radio on the agent's belt crackled to life. This is Blevins. I want to speak to Lieutenant Dunn. 5 minutes or the first hostage dies. The agent hesitated, then reluctantly nodded. 2 minutes to attempt negotiation, then we move in. As they approached the barricaded entrance to D-Block, Dunn felt a strange calm settle over her. Whatever happened next would be the culmination of days of revelation and reckoning, Judgment Day for Coldwater and all it represented. Beside her, Preach began to pray softly, his deep voice barely audible. Give us wisdom to see beyond vengeance to justice, beyond punishment to healing. Dunn wasn't a praying woman, but in that moment she found herself adding a silent, Amen. The standoff lasted 3 hours and 17 minutes. No hostages were harmed. When it ended, Blevins and his fellow officers surrendered, their brotherhood, allies returning to their cells under the watchful eyes of state police, brought in to temporarily manage the facility. What happened inside that barricaded section would be debated for years. How Preach's quiet authority and Dunn's unwavering commitment to accountability somehow penetrated Blevins' desperate bravado. How men trained for violence chose, in the Yavao end, to lay down their weapons. How a system built on force yielded for once to the power of truth. As the last of the Brotherhood members were secured, Dunn found herself standing in the yard, watching Malik being escorted toward the transport van that would take him to Jackson. Despite everything, his dignity remained intact, his back straight, his gaze steady. Their eyes met across the distance. Dunn raised her hand in a gesture that was part salute, part acknowledgement. Malik nodded once in return. A silent communication between two people forever changed by their collision with truth. Behind them, Coldwater stood as it always had, gray and imposing against the Mississippi sky. But something fundamental had shifted within its walls. The myth of its infallibility, the secret machinery of its operation, both had been exposed to the disinfecting light of scrutiny. Whatever came next, the trials, the reforms, the public reckonings, would build upon this moment of judgment. Not just for Kincaid or Morrell or Blevins, but for a system that had allowed darkness to flourish in the name of order. As Malik disappeared into the transport van, Dunn turned back to face the prison that had defined her career. The burden of what she'd learned there would never fully lift. But alongside it now lived something else, a cautious hope that truth once spoken could not easily be silenced again. Behind her, the van's engine started, carrying Malik away from Coldwater for what they both hoped would be the final time. The courtroom fell silent as Lieutenant Rachel Dunn, now Deputy Director Dunn of the Federal Bureau of Prisons Oversight Division, approached the witness stand. The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on carceral reform had been convened amid unprecedented public attention, sparked by the revelations at Coldwater that had rocked the correction system nationwide. Deputy Director Dunn, began the committee chairwoman, in your 20 years of corrections experience, have you ever witnessed systemic change as significant as what's happened at Coldwater Supermax in the past 6 months? Dunn adjusted the microphone, conscious of the cameras broadcasting her testimony across the country. No, Senator, I haven't, she replied. The implementation of independent oversight, the removal of officers implicated in abuse, the establishment of restorative justice programs, these represent a fundamental reimagining of how we approach incarceration. And yet, the senator pressed, you've expressed concerns that these reforms may be temporary. Can you elaborate? Dunn met her gaze steadily. Coldwater's walls haven't changed, Senator. The power dynamics, while adjusted, remain fundamentally intact. We've removed individuals who abused their authority, but we haven't fully addressed the system that empowered them. She leaned forward slightly. As long as we view incarcerated people as less than human, worthy of whatever treatment maintains order, we'll continue creating monsters, both in uniform and behind bars. Strong words, Deputy Director. Necessary ones, Senator. I've seen both sides now. I've witnessed the corruption of good people by unchecked power and the destruction of human potential through systematic dehumanization. Dunn's voice remained professional, but emotion undergirded her words. What happened at Coldwater wasn't an aberration. It was the logical conclusion of a system designed to control rather than rehabilitate. As the questioning continued, Dunn's mind drifted briefly to Coldwater, to the changes implemented and the challenges that remained, to the faces of those still trapped within its walls, including one man whose testimony had made this hearing possible, yet who would likely never taste freedom again. Ray Kincaid's cell in the federal medical facility was larger than his Coldwater accommodation had been, with a window that allowed actual sunlight. But the extra space only emphasized his diminishing presence within it. The diagnosis had come 3 months after his transfer: aggressive pancreatic cancer, already metastasized. The doctors gave him 6 months, maybe less. He sat at the small desk, continuing the journal he'd begun as part of his plea agreement. The federal prosecutors had wanted every detail, every name, every authorization code documented. But somewhere along the way, the clinical accounting of crimes had evolved into something more reflective. Day 187, he wrote, hand trembling slightly from the pain medication. Deputy Director Dunn testifies before Congress today. Strange to think my actions, what I did at Coldwater, have somehow contributed to national debate about prison reform. Not my intention. Never cared about politics. Just did my job. Maintained order. That phrase haunts me now. Maintained order. As if order itself were the highest virtue, regardless of the methods used to achieve it. As if human dignity were an acceptable sacrifice on the altar of compliance. He paused, grimacing at a wave of pain before continuing. I wonder what they're saying about me at Coldwater now. Probably nothing. The powerful once fallen are quickly forgotten. Only the damage they inflicted lives on, rippling through lives like stones thrown into still water. I think about Malik often. Wonder if he truly found freedom, or if Coldwater left its mark on him as indelibly as it did on me, though in different ways. I survived by becoming the prison, by embodying its brutal logic. He survived by transcending it somehow, by refusing to let it define him. The doctors say I don't have long. The irony isn't lost on me, that after all the pain I inflicted, my own end comes not through vengeance but through the random cruelty of disease. No cosmic justice there. Just the indifferent workings of a body in rebellion. If there is judgment after death, I don't know what defense I'll offer. That I was following orders? That others did worse? That the system made me what I became? All I know is that in my final days, I found a strange kind of peace in telling the truth. Too late for those I harmed, too late for redemption. But perhaps not too late to serve as a warning of what power without accountability inevitably becomes. The pen slipped from his fingers as exhaustion overtook him. Outside his window, beyond the secure perimeter of the facility, life continued uninterrupted. Birds flying, clouds drifting, freedom manifest in 1,000 small movements he would never experience again. The Coldwater Library had been transformed. Once a neglected room with outdated legal texts and heavily censored fiction, it now hummed with activity. Study groups gathered at tables, a small bank of secured computers, offered educational programs, and at its center, Malik Ramsey guided a circle of new inmates through orientation. His exoneration had come through 3 months ago. His conviction overturned, his record expunged. He could have walked away, begun rebuilding his life beyond these walls. Many had expected him to. Instead, he'd chosen to return, not as an inmate, but as the director of Coldwater's new Educational Initiatives program, hired by the federal oversight team to help implement sustainable reforms. "The choices that brought each of you here can't be undone," he was saying to the group, seated before him, "but the choices you make while here will define not just your time inside, but who you become after." The new inmates watched him with varying expressions: skepticism, weariness, flickers of hope. Among them, one young man stood out, barely 20, with intelligent eyes burning with barely contained rage. Malik recognized that look immediately. Had seen it in countless faces over the years. Had worn it himself once. "This place was designed to break you," Malik continued, meeting the young man's gaze directly. "To convince you that you're nothing, more than your worst decisions. Nothing more than a number, a security classification, a problem to be managed." He paused, letting the words settle. "I'm here to tell you that's a lie. The most dangerous lie in these walls." The young man, Jackson according to his orientation packet, shifted uncomfortably but didn't look away. "Whatever brought you to Coldwater, whatever you did or didn't do, one truth remains," Malik said, addressing the entire group but still holding Jackson's gaze. "Your humanity is not negotiable, not subject to revocation, not dependent on compliance." Something in Jackson's expression flickered, resistance battling against the desperate need to believe. 6 months ago, this place operated on fear, Malik told them. Fear masked as discipline, control disguised as rehabilitation. That system is being dismantled piece by piece, but its shadow remains. He stood, moving to the library windows that overlooked the yard. "The true test of these reforms isn't what happens in administrative offices or oversight hearings. It's what happens between these walls in everyday interactions. Whether guards see you as human beings worthy of dignity. Whether you see each other that way." Jackson raised his hand, his voice sharp with challenge when called upon. "With all due respect, sir, that sounds like some wishful thinking. Power is power. They have it, we don't." Malik nodded, recognizing the sentiment. "Power is real," he agreed. "But it's not the only reality. Ask yourself, what truly broke men in here before? The physical control? Or the moment they began to believe they deserved nothing better?" The question hung in the air, unanswered but resonant. As the session ended, Malik watched Jackson linger, pretending to examine the bookshelves while the others filed out. "You have a question you didn't want to ask in front of the others," Malik observed, approaching him. Jackson glanced up, defenses still high. "They say you were wrongfully convicted, that you spent 8 years in here for something you never did." "That's right. So why come back?" The genuine confusion in the young man's voice revealed the depth of his cynicism. "Why not just, I don't know, sue everybody and go live your life?" Malik considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Because freedom isn't just about where your body resides," he finally said. "It's about purpose, meaning, and there are still too many men trapped in here physically and mentally who need to hear that their lives matter." Jackson looked away, but not before Malik caught the sheen of moisture in his eyes. "The program I'm starting," Malik continued. "Education, yes, but also training in conflict resolution, community building. I could use someone with your obvious intelligence." "You don't know anything about me." "I know that anger like yours comes from somewhere real," Malik said quietly, "and that it can either consume you or fuel something transformative." After a long moment, Jackson nodded once. Not agreement exactly, but acknowledgement. A beginning. As the young man walked away, Malik felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling across his shoulders. The faces changed, but the struggle remained constant, the fight to preserve humanity in a place designed to strip it away. In the small prison chapel, Preach Matthews stood beside a blue plastic storage container filled with water. Before him knelt a middle-aged inmate, a former Brotherhood member whose journey from hatred to something approaching redemption had unfolded over months of counseling. "You understand this changes nothing about your sentence," Preach said gently. "The state's judgment remains." The man nodded. "I'm not doing this for the state. I'm doing it for my soul." A dozen other inmates watched from the chapel's simple pews as Preach performed the baptism, the water symbolic not just of religious cleansing, but of the possibility of internal transformation even within these walls. As the ceremony concluded, the outer door opened to admit Lieutenant Torres, one of the few original Coldwater officers who had survived the purge, now promoted to head of a restructured security team. He waited respectfully for the service to end before approaching Preach. "Meeting in the conference room," he said quietly. "The Oversight Committee wants all department heads present." Preach dried his hands. "Problem?" Torres hesitated. "Budget cuts. The federal program is being scaled back next quarter." Understanding passed between them, the ever-present threat of regression, of reform's momentum stalling against the inertia of the system. "I'll be right there," Preach assured him. After Torres left, Preach remained a moment in the empty chapel, studying the humble plastic tub that served as his baptismal font. So inadequate a vessel for the weight of transformation it was asked to bear. Yet somehow, sometimes sufficient. Like the reforms themselves. Imperfect, incomplete, yet necessary stepping stones toward some better vision of justice not yet fully imagined. The new warden's office retained little of Morell's decor. Where she had favored imposing dark furniture that emphasized hierarchy, acting warden Santos had opted for a more collaborative arrangement. A round table, comfortable chairs, walls, adorned with artwork created by inmates. The oversight meeting had just concluded, its mixed news absorbed by the assembled department heads. Federal funding would indeed be reduced, an early casualty of changing political winds, but core programs would continue under state supervision. As the others filed out, Malik lingered, reviewing the education budget with Santos. "We can maintain the GED program," Santos was saying. "But the college-level courses might have to be scaled back unless we find alternative funding." Malik nodded, already calculating potential community partners, grant opportunities. The work never ended. Each victory giving way to new challenges, each reform requiring constant vigilance to maintain. "We'll find a way," he said. "These programs are too important to lose." Santos smiled wearily. "I admire your persistence, Malik. 6 months of bureaucratic battles would have broken most reformers." "I survived 8 years of Coldwater at its worst," Malik replied. "Paperwork doesn't scare me." They shared a brief laugh before Santos's expression grew more serious. "You know," she said carefully, "there's talk at the state level about your formal pardon. With that and your education credentials, you could write your own ticket, university positions, advocacy organizations, places where you could affect change on a much larger scale." Malik looked out the window where the yard was visible, inmates moving through their daily routines, guards at their posts, the fundamental architecture of incarceration unchanged despite all their efforts. "I'll leave one day," he acknowledged, "but not yet. There's still too much work here." As if to emphasize his point, the distant sound of a cellblock door sliding shut echoed through the building, that distinctive metallic clang that had punctuated his life for so many years. A sound that still echoed in his dreams. Somewhere in that cell block, young Jackson was facing his first night in Coldwater. Somewhere else, another young man was learning the unwritten rules of survival, the cycle continuing, even as they fought, to redirect its course. "The true measure of these reforms," Malik said almost to himself, "won't be visible for years. It's not about policies or programs ultimately." He turned back to Santos. "It's about whether we can truly see each other's humanity, even within these walls." As he gathered his papers and headed for the door, Malik felt the weight of Coldwater around him, its history, its pain, its stubborn resistance to transformation. Yet alongside that weight lived something else now, the fragile, persistent possibility of change, not victory, not resolution. Just the quiet conviction that the struggle itself mattered, that even within this fortress of control, the human spirit remained ultimately uncontainable. Behind him, another door slammed shut. Another day at Coldwater ended, and another began. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.